Philadelphia, 1958. A small hardware store on a quiet street in South Jersey. The owner refuses to talk about New York, refuses to explain why he left the life, and absolutely refuses to say the name Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson out loud. But on slow afternoons, when customers ask about the faint scar on his neck, Sal Carbone goes quiet. Then he says something strange. "I died in Harlem. I just didn't know it yet." This is the story of how one man survived the most sophisticated trap in organized crime history, not by pulling a trigger, but by pulling strings nobody else could see, and how the Italian mob learned a lesson they'd spend the next decade trying to forget. Most people remember Bumpy Johnson as a gangster. FBI files tell a different story. Between 1952 and 1957, Johnson operated what federal investigators described as the most comprehensive street-level intelligence operation in any American city. It wasn't about muscle, it was about information. Court documents from the 1960s reveal how it worked. Every cab driver, every shop owner, every building superintendent in Harlem between 110th and 155th Street, they all owed Johnson something. A rent payment when the city came knocking, a job for a cousin, a phone call that made a problem disappear. In return, they became his eyes. When someone new entered Harlem, especially someone who didn't belong, Johnson knew within hours, sometimes within minutes. By 1957, this network had become so effective that NYPD detectives admitted they learned about crimes in Harlem from Johnson's people before their own patrols reported them. But information only matters if you know what to do with it. And in March of 1957, Johnson received information that would have sent most men into hiding. According to later testimony from mob turncoat Joseph Valachi, Vito Genovese had authorized a contract, not through his usual channels, not through anyone connected to New York. Three brothers from Philadelphia. No New York ties, no Harlem history, complete unknowns. The strategy was brilliant. Send ghosts to kill a man who saw everything. When Johnson's cab driver contact reported picking up 3 Italian men from Penn Station on March 11th, men asking questions about neighborhoods and schedules, Johnson immediately understood what was happening. His accountant later recalled Johnson's response, "Good, let them look." Most men would run. Johnson did something far more dangerous. He went about his normal routine.
Willie Thompson told this story only once, to a Harlem newspaper reporter in 1971, 3 years after Johnson's death. The interview was buried in the back pages. Almost nobody read it, but it revealed something the legend never captured: the fear. Willie had been cutting Johnson's hair every Thursday for 17 years. Same time, same chair. The ritual was so consistent that neighbors set their clocks by it. On Wednesday, March 13th, Johnson arrived unscheduled, alone. Willie remembered the conversation clearly. Johnson asked a simple question. "You trust me, Willie?" Willie said yes. He'd never had reason not to. Johnson's next words were quieter. "Tomorrow, men are coming here to kill me. When I say your name, you drop. No questions, just drop." Willie asked if they should cancel the appointment. Johnson's response stuck with Willie for the rest of his life. "If I cancel, they'll know I know, and they'll change tactics. Better to control when and where this happens." That night, Willie barely slept. He kept thinking about his scissors, his razors, how vulnerable a man is in a barber's chair, how easy it would be. But the next afternoon, when Johnson walked through the door at exactly 2:30, Willie did what he'd done 1,000 times before. He draped the cape, he prepared the foam, he picked up his razor, and he waited. According to Willie's account, the 3 men entered at 2:47, long coats despite the spring warmth, no conversation, pure intention. The way Willie described it, the youngest one moved first, positioned himself directly behind Johnson's chair. The other 2 secured the exits. Willie's hand was on Johnson's throat with a straight razor when he heard the metallic sound, the hammer of a pistol being drawn back. The gunman whispered instructions. "Keep working. Don't react. This doesn't involve you."
Willie's training from the First World War kicked in. Control your breathing, keep your hands steady, follow orders until the situation changes. Johnson's eyes were closed. The hot towel still covered half his face. Then Johnson spoke, not loud, almost conversational. "Willie, I need you to trust me now." And Willie understood. This was the moment. Johnson said his name. Willie hit the floor.
Police reports from March 14, 1957, described the scene as evidence of defensive action resulting in 2 fatalities. But that bureaucratic language hides what actually happened in Willie Thompson's barbershop. Willie's account, corroborated by 2 witnesses waiting for haircuts, describes a sequence that unfolded faster than anyone could process. The moment Willie dropped, Johnson's hand moved beneath the chair. Something had been secured there, later identified as a snub-nose .32 revolver held with electrical tape. First shot struck the gunman directly behind him. The man, later identified as Dominic Carbone, collapsed immediately. Second shot caught his brother Marco attempting to aim from near the back exit. Marco stumbled through the door into the alley. The third brother, Sal, froze by the front entrance. Before he could decide whether to shoot or run, the front window shattered. 2 men across the street with shotguns, not firing to kill, just firing to send a message. Sal dropped his weapon, raised his hands. The entire sequence took less than a minute. Willie, still on the floor behind the chair, heard Johnson stand up, heard him remove the barber's cape, heard him walk toward Sal Carbone with footsteps that sounded, Willie later said, like he was going to pay for a regular haircut. What Johnson said next became the second part of the legend. Willie couldn't hear the exact words. Johnson spoke too quietly. But he remembered Sal's face, the way it drained of color, the way his legs nearly gave out. And then Johnson stepped back and said something Willie did hear. "Walk, don't run." Sal Carbone walked out the front door. Willie swept up the glass and opened for business the next morning.
Here's what makes this story different from typical gangster mythology. Johnson didn't survive because he was faster with a gun. He survived because he'd already won before the first trigger was pulled. FBI surveillance logs from that period reveal something remarkable. In the 48 hours before the barbershop incident, at least 7 different individuals reported the Carbone brothers' movements to Johnson's associates. The cab driver who picked them up, the hotel clerk where they stayed, the restaurant owner where they ate, even a city sanitation worker who noticed them photographing storefronts. Each person reported independently. None of them knew about the others. They were just paying back favors, keeping Johnson informed like they'd done dozens of times before. This wasn't loyalty bought through fear. Federal investigators noted in later reports that Johnson's network operated on what they called reciprocal obligation. He'd helped them, so they helped him. The Genovese family had sent assassins. Johnson had built a system. 1 week after the barbershop incident, FBI wiretaps captured a conversation between Vito Genovese and his underboss. The transcript was sealed until 1982, but the key lines survived. Genovese: "How do you kill a man who sees you coming from 3 states away?" The answer apparently was, "You don't." Mob historians note that the barbershop incident marked the last serious Italian attempt on Johnson's life. The Genovese family redirected their Harlem ambitions elsewhere and focused on territories where information networks weren't as sophisticated. As for Sal Carbone, his interview with Philadelphia police in 1959, obtained through FOIA requests decades later, reveals why he left organized crime. The detective asked him directly, "Why quit? You survived." Carbone's answer: "Because I realized that day I was never fighting one man. I was fighting 1,000 people who'd never even met me. How do you win that war?"
The legend got simplified over the years. 3 gunmen walk into a barbershop. Only one walks out. Violence, revenge, street justice. But that's not what this story is actually about. Dr. Marcus Williams, a sociologist who studied Harlem power structures in the 1960s, put it differently. He described Johnson's survival as the practical application of social capital in an environment where traditional institutional protection didn't exist. Translation: Johnson built what governments and corporations would later call a stakeholder network. Every favor he granted created a node of information. Every problem he solved created an obligation. Every community connection created early warning systems that no amount of money could replicate. The Genovese family sent professionals with guns. Johnson deployed a community with eyes. Contemporary organized crime analysts point to this incident as a turning point. After 1957, major crime families began investing more heavily in information gathering and political connections, trying to replicate what Johnson had built organically over 2 decades. They never quite succeeded. Willie Thompson gave one final reflection in that 1971 interview shortly before he closed his barbershop for the last time. The reporter asked, "Were you scared that day?" Willie answered, "Terrified. But Mr. Johnson knew something I didn't understand until later. He wasn't in that chair alone. Every person in Harlem who owed him something, they were in that chair with him. The men with guns were outnumbered before they walked through the door." The barbershop stayed open until Willie Thompson retired in 1973. Locals say he never changed the setup. Same chairs, same mirrors. And above the middle station, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, 5 words remained painted in small letters. Not a threat, not a boast, just a reminder of what happens when you try to eliminate a man who's embedded himself into the fabric of a community. The words, "Information is the only weapon." Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, natural causes, surrounded by friends. The Carbone brothers? 2 died in that barbershop. One spent the rest of his life selling hammers and nails in South Jersey, never speaking about the 60 seconds that taught him the difference between power and force. Because in the end, the deadliest weapon isn't hidden under a chair. It's hidden in plain sight, distributed across 1,000 ordinary people who remember favors, who repay debts, and who make sure no stranger moves through their neighborhood unnoticed. That's not a gangster story. That's a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. And it happened in a barbershop in Harlem, 1957.